We're going to talk about a term called congruent. Okay? We're going to talk about and define what it means to be congruent. See, now you're so cool. You've got like 2 of them. And at the end of the year, you can take them home. Because then we'll just put them on the wall.
Are you serious?
See? Now, if you get another one, just add to it. I think it's cool. I mean, seriously, I still keep reminding kids to come pick up their old ones. These are all mine from last year.
That's weird.
Anyway, congruent. So this term congruent is basically a fancy way of saying equal length. Congruent is a geometry term. It's a fancy way equal measure. Congruent is just a fancy way of saying equal measure. When things have equal measurements, that means they have the same length, the same degrees, things like that. In geometry, we use congruency as a kind of like a one-up step of equality, if that makes any sense. They are one in the same, but congruent just sounds fancier. It has a symbol, that. That symbol means congruent. If 2 segments are congruent, that means they are equal in length. So if you have a segment that is 4, this is AB. Oops. And I have a segment over here. That's 4, and that's XY. Are those 2 equal? It's scaled, not drawn to scale. Are they equal in measure? Yes. So they're equal in measure, which means they equal the same amount. So what you could say is that AB is congruent to XY. If they have the same numerical value, they're congruent. That's all congruency means. We talk about this idea of congruency early, because later on we start to do what are called proofs, which means we can prove that things are congruent to one another via a bunch of steps. Okay? That was the first thing we had to do today. Really, really easy. Right? Yay.
Yay.
Thank you for being enthusiastic.
You're welcome.
The next thing I do is this. If I can spell this right. Midpoint. Gee, let's take some contextual clues from here and figure out what the word midpoint might be. It's a tough one.
It's middle.
Point in the middle?
Point between 2 segments. You know what that might be?
It might just be, it could be, it is. It is anything that cuts a segment into, two congruent parts. When you put something in the middle of something, there's 2 halves. 2 halves make the whole. And the reason why I say anything, because it could be a point, it could be a segment, it could be a ray, it could be a line, it could be anything. A midpoint just happens to be the place at which creates the 2 parts that are the same on both sides. What we do is, we do it via a diagram. You guys ever heard of an if-then statement?
Yeah.
All right, what is it?
If this happens, no,
It's a hypothesis.
It's a hypothesis.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, cool. What we do in geometry a lot of times is that most of our definitions are always written out into what are called if-then statements. They're the hypothesis, thesis, whatever you want to call it, statement-wise like that. If something is occurring, then the following will always happen. It's the same basic idea here. So if I write it like this, if B is a midpoint of AC. Are you guys going to be angry at me if I forget the little bars over segments? Are you going to get over it?
no.
That's a good question. Not when it comes down to labeling parts and things, quite honestly, if you have two letters and you're talking about a midpoint, you have to be only talking about a segment. That's the only thing you can be talking about. Really the only thing I want to make sure that you worry about labeling is that when you have if I say angle x, y, z, I have to put this symbol for it. My angle symbol, and you'll see this tomorrow again, looks a little bit different than what you guys are used to. You guys are used to just seeing this for an angle. What does that also look like?
Oh.
Less than. It's a less than symbol.
Yeah.
When I was taught geometry back in a long time ago, my teacher, Mrs. Bender, remember her, she always put an arc in her angle symbol. She put the arc and the angle symbol. The reason that we put the arc and the angle symbol is because angles are derived from the unit circle, which you guys will do later next year, and that's why there's arcs in certain values. I've always put an arc in my angle. It looks a little bit different than what you've seen textbooks, but look over it. But what else has three letters? Planes, triangles, all of that. So usually, if you don't label a midpoint with a bar over it, it's not the end of the world. This kind of stuff, you have to make sure you put a label. There's a lot of little things that I should really, really worry about with you guys. But if you get the general concept that if B is a midpoint, you get two equal segments, I'm happy. The rest of it's just great if you know how to label it. Okay. So B being a midpoint creates those two congruent segments. Well, what are going to be the two congruent segments here? AB and okay. Geometry, what we do to show congruency in a diagram, is we put tick marks. That tick mark here between AB is the same amount of tick marks between here and B and C. That means that those two guys are going to be equal to each other. Those two will be congruent. So my then portion of this statement would be then AB is congruent to BC. That's what we write. And by writing it out like that, it's going to get us to be able to put the algebraic statements together to show what parts have to be equal to each other and how do you solve it from there. It winds up being, most of the stuff just winds up turning into a, most of the stuff winds up turning into a one or a two-step algebra problem, just from that statement. So whenever you see that you have a midpoint, all you gotta do is write down the two chunks that are gonna be equal to each other and fill in the blanks from there, okay? Let me show you an example.
Oh, we solving this?
Yes, sir.
I ain't done.
All right, that's to start out with. We always start with the super easy stuff. Yes, it's numerical value. It's a matter of where does the WX go? Is it the whole thing? Is it one of the chunks? And so on. It doesn't get terribly goofy, shall we say, really until you get into some of the algebra stuff. But even those are still 1 or 2 step equations. So they're not going to be terrible. So when you do this, we know that x is the midpoint. What are the 2 segments that have to be equal to each other? XW and XY? Can you say it as XW, XY, or do you have to say WX, XY? Isn't XW the same thing as WX?
Yeah.
It means the same thing. The only reason that I say going WX to XY is because I'm starting at one endpoint, I'm passing through the midpoint, getting to the next endpoint. I'm starting at one spot and working my way through. That way I know when I hit X, it marks the spot of the midpoint. So you do this. You know that WX, well, what's WX? Very good. WX is X1. That's good. But what does XY have to equal? 8. So if this is 8, and this is 8, the whole thing is, see how it goes back to segment addition then? You are very smart. All right. This whole idea of how the geometry stuff builds upon one chunk, that first chunk of the segment addition, you're going to use it here. Tomorrow when we talk about, I remember having an angle here. Tomorrow when we talk about angle addition, it's the exact same thing, but in this case, instead of being on a segment, you're on an angle, and you're walking across the angles, getting 2 angles. Oop, I skipped ahead of the last thing. How did I get off sequence? Here we go. All right, let's go to the algebra. Are you okay with me abbreviating midpoint as MDPT?
I mean, yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
I'm kind of lazy when it comes to writing things, just because I am. Exactly. Right. Write out the statement that shows that it's true. Think about it as the if-then. If Q is the midpoint of PR, then what are the 2 segments that are created? Fill in the blanks and try and solve. What I'd like you to do is set it up and then figure out what will PQ equal? What will QR equal? And then what is PR? Okay. Write out the statement that happens. If Q is the midpoint of PR, then blank equals blank. What are those blanks algebraically? Fill it in straight down. You get an algebraic statement, or equation, excuse me. It always thinks it's a doorbell when it does that. Sorry if I really embarrassed you today. Let's just jump right early again.
Okay.
It was bound to happen to somebody eventually.
As we said, at least it's your first. It's the first one, not the last one.
Just gonna count.
You get those 2 statements that are, or that statement which will be true because of the definition of being a midpoint. PQ is 6x minus 7. QR is 5x and 1. Oh, there's no O's. It's PQs and R's. Sorry. So you have variables on both sides of the equation. Who do you pick on?
The little guy.
Always pick on the little guy. Now, I don't condone bullying except in algebra. Did you just get that?
No, no.
Is he harassing you again?
Yeah.
Terry, where are you?
So you pick on the little guy who you're going to move around. 5x or the 6x?
5x.
How do you move a positive 5x?
Minus.
Subtract. 5x, or excuse me, 6x subtract 5x, you're left with
An X.
an x. X minus 7 is 1. Add 7 and you get? X equals 8. Very good.
So now,
So now with any luck, when you substitute back in, going to the PQ, you get 6 times 8 minus 7. 5 times 8. Oh, plus 1, excuse me. When I write things out like that, 6 parentheses 8, you guys all know that means that means multiplying, right?
yeah.
Okay. One of the reasons that I write out what I'm going to do before I put it in the calculator is because no matter what calculator you guys have, if you type it like that with the parentheses, it's always going to work. It's going to group things up nicely. So you can see you get 6 times 8, which is 48. Subtract 7, you get 41. Good.
E.
41. Hey, look at that. 41. It's a good thing because they should be the same thing. If not, we done goofed. And 41 and 41 is?
82.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Don't hide her stuff. That's not nice. Who's trying to hide her stuff?
So go, people.
I understand there's a time and a place. If you're done, I mean, more often than a lot of it, like, would it be probably Friday? Friday would probably be doing a lot of just work in class. You listen to music doing it? I don't care. Just do it. That's what I would do. As long as I can't, as long as it's not like deafening to everybody, it'd be all right. So first one we have m's the midpoint, which means that AM has to equal or it is congruent to MC. So you just write out the statement. X plus 20 is 5x minus 4. All right? Variables on both sides of the equation, what are you going to do? Yep, subtract the smaller one. Which is smaller, 1x or 5? 1x. Subtract the x. So I have 20 is 4x minus 4. Now what?
Add the 4 to the other side.
Add the 4 to the other side. Very good, very good. Add the 4 to the other side. And then last but not least,
Divide the 4.
and you get? So if x is 6, I think it asked you to figure out what AM was. So 6 plus 20 is? Yay.
Just to choose.
All right. It's nice when things work out for you. Same thing on the other side. The other side, there's a couple of different ways to set it up. Excuse me. They're still going to be equal to one another because m's a midpoint. Now, a lot of times people freak out with the whole extra negative thing. There's nothing wrong with it. You can leave the negative there. You can move it. It's okay because is negative 2 smaller than positive 4? Yeah. If you keep following the idea of picking on the little guy, you're going to wind up with a positive value. So how do you move a negative?
You add.
You add. So we add the 2x over.
6.
Now what?
You add.
You add
Add
the
12. Good, good. Add 12. Divided by 6.
Did you just say 2? Who's mad?
You get 5.5.
E.
Decimals are okay, guys. Decimals are all right. You're going to see more and more decimals as you go along. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. As you substitute that back in, you know that x is 5.5, so you go back up top. MR, so you have negative 2 times 5.5, oops, plus 21. Well, if you double 5.5, you get 11. Multiply it by a negative, you get negative 11. Negative 11 and 21 is? 10.
Dang.
Not bad, is it? But can you see why I didn't want to try and shove all that into one day? It would have been too fast, too much stuff. You want to do one more, or you just want to call it quits?
Call quits.
So why'd you guys say
Don't really say it that fast. Though.
Right.
Come on. Actually, let me show you this real quick. This is the first question on the homework for tonight. This is 19. On this question, you still have the midpoint given to you, but I want to show you the algebra real fast. I've had quite a few questions about this, people not knowing what to do when they have this. What happens here is that you still have variables on both sides of the equation. You still want to pick on the little guy. So which one are you going to move? The 3x, very good. So if I take 3x to move it over to the right,
There's a zero.
there's a what?
There's a zero.
Very good, very good. It's okay to have a side wind up equaling 0. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Because now on the other side, you have 5x subtract the 3x, you have 2x minus 6. Which means, what do you have to move that? I don't have to move I could move the x.
No, the 6.
Just move the 6. By moving that 6, you're getting rid of that negative over there, and everything's going to be positive. Does that make sense? I had a lot of kids asking me about this earlier today because they were freaking out about the whole, what do I do with the 0? I don't know what to do. And that's usually what sophomores, a lot of you guys sound like.
Who's man? What do we know?
This was Tuesdays. Today's Wednesday, so we will finish out. Same page. We'll start at 19 through the 29 odds.
39.
And then 39 and 40. Give me a second. I'll put it up on the board for you. Just got to take a picture of it to fit it on the screen. And then I'll let you guys work. And I'll wander around and help you out if you need it. Some of you guys, yeah, it's on the same page. You said you did 19, I think, didn't you?
Oh, never mind.
John.
Can you like put it like back up to 2 so look at the 19 problem again?
Yeah, I'm putting it on there right now.
Right. There's a reason. It was like 2 months. It was like 2 months.
It could have been 2 months.
Today's the 30th.
31st?
No, tomorrow is.
Oh, yeah.
Am I ugly?
31. See, look. Yeah, it's August. It's 31 days. It's just when you do stuff. Like, you're not
I didn't say anything.
So if I was just sorry.
Okay, so
There you go, guys.
Like, when you dress, like, how to dress for a stand?
Ladies and gentlemen, there's the problems for today, starting up at 19. By all means, if you want to take a picture of it, go ahead right now. That way you don't have to worry about loading up the whole Chromebooks to get the whole, getting the screenshots and whatnot. Or just, most people have been able to get through, I'd say about 90% of it before they even get out of here today. So you guys,
What time is it?
I think we're out of here at what? 24, 25, something like that. You got, yeah, you got plenty. You'll knock out at least half of this without a problem. All right? Yes, ma'am. That's the best I can get to make it fit.
Joseph.
Yeah, that's it.
Did you get it?
I helped her out.